Hi, my name's Duncan Poulton, and thanks to B3 Biennial for inviting us to do this panel discussion. I'm the Programme and Digital Officer at Film London Artist Moving Image Network, which is also known as FLAMIN. And we're a department within Film London, which provides funding, guidance and development opportunities for artist filmmakers based in the UK. Through unique commissioning funds at FLAMIN, we've commissioned over 150 productions and supported the careers of countless other artists with programs of one-to-one advice, residencies and workshops. Programs that we run include the Film London Jarman Award, which is a prestigious annual prize worth £10,000, and it's now in its 14th year. We also run FLAMIN Productions, which is a major commissioning fund for mid-career artists based in London. And most recently, we've set up a new scheme called FLAMIN Animations, which is for young artist animators. Today, I'm really pleased to be joined by three artist filmmakers that we've been working with on another program that we run called the FLAMIN Fellowship. This is for early career artists that work with the moving image. And Holly, Joseph and Anita were all chosen from a highly competitive open call for the FLAMIN Fellowship in 2020. And we've worked with them over the past year to develop their ambitious moving image projects. A bit about the FLAMIN Fellowship. It offers a unique opportunity for developing professional artistic practice. We run monthly workshops covering a lot of areas of professional practice, like selling artwork, film festival strategy, writing funding applications, archiving work, sound design, copyright, and just learning how to sustain a practice as an early career artist. And just to say that everyone in the program that's joining us today has work showing at B3 Biennial, so do go and check that out afterwards. That's a bit from me. I just wanted to invite the artists to introduce themselves and a bit about their work to kick off. Holly, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I mainly use film in the form of installation and live video performance and sound, and more recently within a more linear framework, which is a new direction. But mainly the editing is led by more of a poetic, non-linear logic, always drawing on my archive of footage that I've taken mostly through my phone. And I'm drawn to this sort of intimate and immediate form of filmmaking that's really documentary in a sense, in that it seeks an intimacy to get close with my subjects, to reveal, embodied knowledge and lived experience and elevate that. And I usually build my works out of fragments and loops, and really interested in how when there's a reshuffling or an unraveling, how new forms of communication can unfold. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Holly. Joseph, do you want to talk a bit about your work?
Yeah, hi, I'm Joseph Wilson. I am a queer artist, activist and drag performer. And my work takes inspiration from the LGBTQIA+ narrative, being inspired by my own lived experience and the stories of those around me. I'm really interested in kind of shining a light on these stories and these narratives that were kind of hidden from me as I was growing up in the early 2000s. And my work has, the film that is playing in this program was about Section 28, which was a law brought in by Margaret Thatcher, which made it illegal to speak about or have any teachings or promotions about being gay. So that was shot in 2019. And I worked. It was a really great opportunity to be involved in the FLAMIN Fellowship, and the film that I made with FLAMIN has just was just selected as part of the Dazed Circa class of 2021 and screened on Piccadilly Circus, and it will be playing also at this year's BFI Film Festival, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, we're all very excited about it. That's great. Thanks. Anita, do you want to talk about your work?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anita Safowaa. I'm an interdisciplinary artist from London. A lot of my work focuses on observing and critiquing underdocumented cultural experiences for the purpose of preserving them. And I mainly use film, new media technologies, and reflective writing to kind of piece this experience. A lot of my work is embedded in kind of individual and collective memory, with the hopes of creating quite immersive and intimate learning experiences. At the moment, a lot of my work has been focused on the Black British experience and how, I guess, how Black Britishness kind of constitute to overall notions of Britishness, and also questioning culture and identity within that. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Anita. Yeah, so I guess for a bit of context, when we selected you all, which was just after the pandemic hit in 2020, and everyone that we picked that year had these quite personal projects, and it felt like a key turning point in a lot of people's work. I wondered if you could each talk a little bit about that experience of working closely with your family or with a particular community, and how you deal with that and how you represent that. Joseph, do you want to talk to that?
So how can you just repeat the question? Sorry. So
how you approach working with the community that you're representing or embedded within in your work?
Yeah. Well, I it's what's on the tip of my tongue is that for the Dazed Circa thing, the project that my film just got into, which was what originated from the FLAMIN Fellowship, the theme was community. And when I kind of had to really look into what the film was about and how it related to that theme, what the narrative throughout the film is about LGBT adolescence and growing up other, and why it really fit into this idea of community is because although there's so many different representations within the LGBTQIA+ community, we all share that same communal experience of growing up as other, and we all have that connection that even though we all identify really differently, we all share that similar bond. And when people, like when I was applying for Arts Council for it as well, it's like how will people engage with this film? And it was, when I was thinking about that, I wanted everyone who would watch this to kind of feel like it was a film speaking to them. And as I said, like a lot of my work, really, I'm really interested in these narratives that weren't around when I was growing up. And for LGBT people to see this film and kind of feel connected to it, it's really important because those storylines just weren't around. And I'm really excited for people to see it, and it got a really good reception. And at the at Piccadilly Circus, the fact that I was there enjoying it in such a public space with my friends and my family was, the idea of community just keeps on building. And making that public art as well, and being really intrusive for our community that has been so easily kind of marginalized. It's like the project keeps going. Like the more and more things happen with it, the more new things are coming out of it, which it's really beautiful. Yeah.
It was great to see the images of you with your friends, like watching it in London. It was amazing. And
I cried at the end. It was a lot,
But it's great to get but to get that kind of big public audience and make it like accessible. And I was wondering because Anita, you're the way that you're working kind of is trying to bring out immersive experiences and in a more accessible way. I wondered if you want to talk a bit about your experiences of working with the project that you applied to the FLAMIN Fellowship with, and
Yeah, I mean, so when applying to FLAMIN, I knew that I wanted to do a project around Ghanaian migration, and originally it was supposed to be a VR experience. But kind of after doing a VR piece just before coming onto FLAMIN, I realized how individual the experience was. And for the FLAMIN project, which explores kind of Ghanaian migration and the influences on migration during the year that Ghana gained independence in 1957 to when my parents came in 1990, it's very much a collective experience. It's piecing in archival materials, which are from kind of institutions, but also first-hand accounts from Ghanaian elders as well. So there's loads of experiences all kind of meshed into one storyline. So from that, it almost called to be kind of an installation, but also a single screen work. So it's for like collective viewing, essentially. And I think the element of community in my work is not something that is kind of, well, it didn't come out of lockdown. I mean, from, I guess, maybe even before going to film school, maybe even in my undergrad or in fashion, everything we kind of researched and looked at was surrounding trends and looking at groups of people throughout history, style communicated throughout history. And there's always been this kind of collective storytelling. And I think, especially like the area that I come from, it's very multicultural. There's loads of different communities all within one. So everyone has their space, but everyone does coexist at the same time. So I guess that element of being within a community or having commonalities with different people has kind of always been within me. And when I started kind of experimenting with film, those kind of narratives came out because I started telling stories that were close to me, essentially. So community in essence was a byproduct of that. And I guess it's something that I'm thinking more about now in terms of like who's able to come and see my work, who's able to not, how can I make my work more accessible to the communities that I'm speaking to, not only in bringing the experience to them, but also thinking about what kind of things would they like to see also. Because thinking about like how, for example, a gallery space is set up. A lot of my friends don't go to gallery spaces. A lot of people from my area don't go to gallery spaces, and that's mainly because it doesn't feel very welcoming. So I guess it's in the design of gallery spaces as well. So it's thinking about all these things in terms of accessibility, not in just bringing the pieces to the communities that my work discusses, but also how do I make it more inviting? How do I make it more familiar and make it engaging, kind of like all in one? But
because it feels like during COVID, with everything being online, it's kind of leveled things out in a way. But as things start to kick back to normal in the UK, it's like you can see those art world structures re-emerging, and it'll be interesting to see how whether that hybrid online and offline will continue and increase accessibility. Holly, did you want to talk about your project and working with your people so close to you?
Yeah, so my work has, ever since finishing art school as well, mainly, it's my films and my footage is all really, really, really intimate collections, and like fragments of the everyday and people that are really close to me. Like that's how the work develops. It doesn't develop from an idea first. Like I always admire that when people have ideas and then they go and execute them. Whereas the things have to be happening in front of me, beside me, with me, and then I go and it's in the editing that I more like see how things come together. And so I guess, interestingly, working with my mother and brother, and that was interesting how it did coincide with COVID. It's certainly not about that, and then when the application happened for FLAMIN and just all of that timing, I was spending only my time with my mom and brother, and for months, like when it started, and there was just so much time to like converse and a lot of like waiting and being with each other where really wonderful conversations were had. It was only us three for a really long time, and so that's how it started. And then that's when I realized, okay, I should apply to FLAMIN with this project, and that's how it unfolded. So it's never the other way around for me. I could never think an idea into existence and go about it that way. It all has to like be birthed from a grounding in what's happening in my life, or what's happening in an intimate form of filmmaking, something that's like already happened on screen rather than predetermined. Yeah, and I just find that I'm more of an authentic artist when I'm able to capture someone else being their authentic selves. And so I suppose that's why for so long too I was so married to building footage out of phone cameras, because there's an impulsiveness and kind of an immediacy and an intimacy that sometimes gets lost with more professional equipment. But yeah, and so even the new directions I've been going in the last year of allowing myself to use different equipment, it's nice that that language has been able to stay with me and not get lost too much in that. But yeah, that's really important to me, that things stay intimate and true to the community.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely had good foresight to build a project that could work so well within the restrictions that we were under at that time. And you were kind of gathering all this footage throughout those lockdowns. But I mean, Joseph, you were out. You were doing all the filming during COVID, and very impressive gung ho attitude. I wondered if you could talk about how that was for you.
It was really stressful. I'm not gonna lie. Like, for example, I remember going down to, it was in between, like when things weren't really sure what was going on, and I was going down to Hastings to shoot Kenya, the caravan, and even like the spacing in the car, and like this was part of the project that I didn't have Arts Council then. I was just like having to pay, I was using my own money at this point, and it was just I had to do everything. I had to do like get the food, drive us down, look after the talent, do the set. I did everything because there was no, I mean, money was an issue as well at that point, but the COVID kind of restriction didn't allow me to like have those extra people there, because the guy whose caravan it was didn't want any more than like 3 people there. And just having to do the COVID health and safety was really annoying. having to do like those forms and stuff. I'm so bad at it. I'm good at just like making the film, and all that other stuff I found difficult going through it. And also as well, like people pulling out because of COVID, you know, it's always that risk you're having to take, because you could put everything and set everything on this day, and then the person that you're filming is like, I've got COVID, and then everything's just gone. Actually, we were meant to film one day, and the person that was being filmed was like, I don't want to come, actually, because of COVID, even though it's outside. But you can't make anyone do it. To me, I'm that kind of just like, I take risks, so I'm just like, yeah, it's fine. But everything was pretty much shot outside, but it was stressful. But also, I'm glad as well at the same time, because there was less people around. So if everything went smoothly, there was just kind of, it was a bit more calmer actually at that time. Now it feels like everything's back to normal, and it's like the race is back on, sort of thing. I'm really glad that there was like a moment in time where I got to make this film, and it was really quite like, as you said at the start, a turning point for my career. I'm really grateful for it, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to
for the
ask
time, not for COVID.
Yeah, because I've heard other artists talking about how the whole experience of being in lockdown and having these constraints has kind of changed their practice, like irrevocably, and kind of paring things down more. I wondered if, well, this is to anyone, how that whole experience has changed your practice, and whether you'll go back to how you were making before, or whether there's been things that will stick with you.
Yeah, I think it's made me slow down a lot more, because with the last two pieces of work that I've made, it was very much under commission deadlines. So I think my first film, the turnaround was about maybe 2 months. The VR piece I did, the turnaround from actual shoot to delivery was 2 weeks, which was like literally, I don't want to work like that again. It was so stressful. Plus I was working full time at the time as well. So like, it was a lot of, I felt like before I was doing a lot of multitasking, a lot of juggling, and I felt like my practice was very much less of a priority. But I think since COVID and having the time, even though I was working, but having the time, like more time to reflect, and actually, for example, doing the FLAMIN Fellowship and having more time to actually develop a project and actually like let it sit for a bit and maybe not touch it for like a month and come back to it and see if I feel differently about it and to make tweaks. Kind of having that time to kind of, I don't know, like to let things sit, I think is something that I'll definitely take more in my practice. And yeah, it's made me prioritize my practice more as well, being in lockdown and stuff, because it made me think like, what am I actually trying to do here, and what is the gravity of the work that I'm trying to produce? And I guess if I don't make it priority now and going out of COVID, when will I? So it made me really ask those important questions, which I think, yeah, is very much further shaped my practice, like way after lockdown. So yeah, it's been a blessing, I think. Well, for me anyway.
Yeah, it has. Like, I think even like the really like ugly, horrendous parts of COVID, I think a lot of people, well, maybe not frontline workers and stuff like that, but a lot of people can say that there was a big chunk of people were given a chunk of time that they hadn't experienced before. And I think that was it. And then coinciding with like FLAMIN too was just this like really beautiful incubation period to like, yeah, as you said, Anita, like prioritize, like for my experience anyway, my practice really, really grew out of like a really long period of not making work after I graduated art school, like 6 years. And then it's only been in the last like few years that I've like really started to move it more in a more like serious direction. But before then, like even though that time of not making it was really, really important for me because I was making without realizing. I was like collecting and thinking and being with people and talking, and that just space felt a lot more authentic than just like making art for the sake of making art. And then just being so busy trying to survive in London and working multiple jobs that the creative side always was just like a tangent that followed you along while you were busy doing the other things. When COVID hit, and then just that time changed things a lot for me, I think.
Yeah, like back to kind of like the lockdown thing, like I think like with the kind of the time for the filmmaking and artistic practice, like I have such bad anxiety, and it was only when like everything kind of stopped that I actually flourished, because I was able to kind of, when everything was stopping, I was actually able to like that kind of like state of relaxation I was finally able to have, like getting out of this like fight or flight mode that I feel like I was constantly in. And I've learned to kind of manage things better and be able to kind of plan things and say yes to things. And like the more, I don't know, after this year, I just feel like everything is just kind of slotting so much better. Like I don't know how I was living my life really before. I've picked up so many tools through lockdown, working the FLAMIN Fellowship, working other programs that have really kind of allowed me to focus and kind of get my name noticed, I listened to a really good podcast with Louis Theroux and Sia about having mediocre success and then kind of taking a real good look at what you're doing and like making the changes and everything kind of going up to that next level. And I really feel like it's kind of happening, which I'm really excited about.
What were they saying, Joseph? Just to take yourself seriously and.
Yeah, well, for Sia, it was she went sober, and she was like, before she went sober, she was having mediocre success, and as soon as she kind of like stopped drinking, everything kind of took off. And I'm the same now. I'm almost a year sober. So like the whole way through that year, it's been like I've been working on a lot of things, and like it's paying off for sure. I look younger as well.
That's so nice.
I was wondering if the importance of having that peer group that you had together during the past year, and how important that was when everyone was so isolated.
Yeah, we miss it, don't we?
Yeah,
we miss it. I'm like, where's my
so lucky though, like what that like
where you just have to look at my work and talk about it and think about it.
And also like if it wasn't in lockdown, like I wonder what the experience would have been like. It'd be interesting to speak to someone who had done it out of COVID, because the fact that we always had that time, you know, it was
such an interesting collision.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, it's like, oh gosh, we never got to have our sessions in person, and we're actually only going to be meeting each other for the first time, and like, you know, next month when we have our reunion, but we haven't even met each other yet. Yeah, there was a closeness to our group, I feel.
It's just like a moment. It's like, so I think it's even more special than out of lockdown, because it was like when someone talks about 2020, you know, everyone knows what was happening in 2020, and for me anyway, like it was such a life-changing year, and like this was part of it. You know, it all factors in. It feels like, for me, it feels so long ago now.
I think
remember that spring. It was so sunny and hot, and it was just like I remember I was doing the artist way for the first time, and I would never things like that as well. I would never do the artist way now because I'm too busy. Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh, I'll do this because I actually have time to get up and write. I'm just sitting outside and then having like, I remember like getting the phone call from Duncan to my room, and it was spring. It was spring, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the fellowship is such like it was such an incubator, and then COVID we were in this little hibernation bubble, and the two things together were just so nourishing and fruitful that I do wonder what it would be like. I mean, Duncan, you would know, but I wonder if the energy changes and things it doesn't feel like an incubation space, rather it feels like more go.
Yeah, I mean, with your group, there was this kind of continuity because we met up so regularly, and there was definitely a good community feeling to that that perhaps we haven't had in other years.
We were all going through the same thing. Do you know what I mean? It was that again, that communal experience. Like we were all on Zoom because we couldn't meet in person. You know, it wasn't. We would all be living. It was all like the same thing. There was nothing else really happening. I mean, you'd be doing stuff, but we were all living in a lockdown, in a pandemic.
And it was very supportive too, like because I never went to art school and stuff like that. So I wasn't really in tune with this kind of studio living and all the artists kind of bonding together and stuff like that. It's always just been like, if I'm making stuff, it was me talking to myself, and then maybe like pestering my siblings and being like, oh, listen to this. They don't care. Like they're just listening out of respect kind of thing. But I think like just being in the cohort and just hearing other people's ideas and how they approach like working, and then getting feedback on my ideas too. And just like everyone just working on things just made me just work and like just want to go hard too, because I do find when I work alone, I tend to kind of push things to the corner, or I'll get back to it in a bit, or like I'm very like I wouldn't use the word lazy. I procrastinate a lot. That's what I do. I procrastinate so much if I'm not in like a cohort, or if I'm not working towards a deadline. And I think, yeah, definitely being part of like FLAMIN and being in such a like everyone said, like an incubator, like a supportive incubator, and like everyone actually caring about your ideas and feeding back, like it just makes you develop the work in a much more nourishing way.
Yeah, because we all had such sharp focus as well. It's not like it was just like, oh, this nice little like la-di-da period. It was like we're also focused. Like, well, I can't speak for everyone else, but me, it just really like pushed me into a new place and how I like think about myself and my work and how to take that more seriously so it can actually become sustainable, or the practice can grow out of that focus.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and how do you feel like, because now I think you've all had Arts Council funding to make work now, haven't you? So I was wondering how, because I think for most of you that's the first time, and how you feel about where you were before you joined the fellowship and now, and how the ambition of your work has changed, and maybe, and how the time scale has changed, because Anita, you're talking about how it's a long form project, and with artist filmmaking you kind of go from doing things in a DIY way to then applying for funding, and then time scales get bigger, and how you found that.
I think because thinking about it now, from when we did FLAMIN to now is about a year. So the actual Arts Council funding that I have is not particularly for the FLAMIN project. It's actually to develop my practice. So I still do need to go and get funding for the FLAMIN project. So it would be like over nearly a year and a half that I've been sitting with this project. And like, I think pre-FLAMIN, there would be this kind of anxious urgency that I need to get this funded, I need to get it done, I need to get it out. But I'm very much comfortable with the fact that like it's taking this long, and I feel like it's almost necessary that it needs to take this long to make sure that I'm doing the work justice as well. So I think the main difference between before and now in my attitude and the way that I approach projects is having this comfortability with the fact that things are going to take time, and I guess not having this kind of pressure to constantly produce, which I was very much feeling before coming on FLAMIN.
How about you, Joseph? Because your way of working is quite what's the word? you like to do things as soon as you can. So I was wondering how you feel about having bigger pots of money and reporting to more stakeholders and all that stuff as you start to scale up what you do.
I think once you get, like, when I got Arts Council, it's kind of that was my first. I got the emergency fund through lockdown, but when it was my second time applying for it, and it was like a relief, because although it's a bigger time, you've got a lot longer to kind of work with. It's like that relief of not having to write another application. But I'm about to come to the end of the evaluation process, and it's just kind of, it makes you feel it's a bit like a safety net when you get the Arts Council, because like no matter what, it's kind of that money is there and that support is there, and it is really validating getting Arts Council funding, because it's kind of like, as we've said, like this kind of turning point through lockdown. Like I know people that have applied for Arts Council so many times and they've never got it, and I had never gotten it. I applied for a few times, and I applied at the time at like the highest, at like the record number of applications for London applicants as well, and it was just really kind of that. I really valued that, and it's making me even, it's pushing me now even more so that I want to like apply. I want to be pushing my work now, moving it from moving image to installation. I don't doubt myself anymore that I won't be able to get more funding from them because of that first time round. So once you kind of nail that, I think it kind of encourages you to go to push your work even further, because you know that people are kind of supporting it. Because before, like even before FLAMIN, there was nothing that I had been supported by, to be honest. Like, you know, it's everything that I'd worked for myself. I just go out and just keep making my own work with my camera. It might go online or something, but that was kind of it. Like putting all my money into my work. And even the 2 films that I made, Il Widner, that's playing in the program, you know, I've self-funded that, and this other film, when it came out, it went online, but I didn't get any reimbursement for that cost. But I kind of just, you know, if I hadn't have invested in that, then I probably wouldn't have gotten into FLAMIN. You know, it's all these stepping stones where you just kind of, yeah. I'm about to go and do a talk to like young filmmakers as well, and that's kind of like a really like important thing of it. Is like I just went out there and just made what I wanted to make. 'Cause I'm so impatient. I just want to, like, I know what I want to do, and I'm like, if no one's going to give me any money, I'm just going to do it myself, and it will pay off in the end. You know, if you trust it and you believe in it, then it's worth it. And like now, like, you know, all these years later, I'm getting Arts Council, I'm getting into the FLAMIN Fellowship, I'm getting my film on Piccadilly Circus. It's like, it was worth it.
That's a good inspirational quote, that is.
Yeah.
I think I might write that down.
What was the inspirational quote? The whole thing?
Yeah.
You need to be a motivational speaker.
I'm doing a talk for 16 to 24-year-olds next week, and I'm also doing one to like some people at the XL Centre, whether they want to go to university or not. I'm like, I'm just gonna say no. No, I do actually. I'm glad I went to university. Some things, some seeds were definitely sown.
Yeah, I think if I was gonna speak to a group of 16 to 24-year-olds, I'd say, like, don't over romanticize DIY. Because I mean, it just goes back to what you guys were saying about getting the funding and everything and changing gears in a practice. But it is actually so vital to be supported and like work within a team, because much like Joseph before that, I was like the queen of DIY. Even like the majority of like creative things I did, were undocumented, and I was way more interested in work that happened in gatherings and happenings and parties and undocumented, and these sort of like pop-up poetry events, or just these, and everything I did was like, the music I used was like not copyright material, and I was just like, it was very like just like punk in how I approached everything, I guess. And but I do see the value in that as well, in sort of taking the reins. But then so much, I've changed a lot how I think about support and how important it is to get proper funding just to sustain yourself, because ultimately if you are married too much to the idea of DIY and I can do this, you'll eventually burn out. And also money allows you to like expand your team, and making with more people is like just a really beautiful thing to have that support. Like, because the Arts Council funding I got, I wrote into the budget like certain mentors and, you know, a couple like part-time impact producers to help like with the distribution side, just different things where it's like I'll be more held accountable to them as well. And it just changes gears on things, and it is important. And I held off applying for funding for so long that I look back, I just think like, why? I don't know. I just sort of felt like, oh, they take so much time to write and then might not get it. So you know what? I'm just gonna like work at my job and pay for it myself, and do this sort of mentality will eventually burn you out. So I think everything in moderation. Like if you don't get funding, you should still go and do your thing. But
it's part of this like conveyor belt mentality of the art world coupled with social media. I think that you have to be making and producing and distributing new work all the time, when really, especially with artist filmmaking, projects take a lot longer. But there's this kind of social anxiety that's born out of that makes you feel guilty for not making work. So I think that leads into why you feel like applying for stuff can be a waste of time.
I think that's why like professionalizing my practice like actually really put me off for a while, because I really just hated it, like the art world and how it functioned and the stuff that was being like churned out. It just looked like work where people were more interested in building their CVs than actually making the work. And it feels like that. There's this like hyper professionalism and hyper individualism in the art world, and the stuff that's expected of your time, and how to make and how like slick to produce your projects. That's something that always like turned me off. But again, it's finding your own trajectory that feels right for you. And it is important ultimately to professionalize in terms of sustainability of your practice and being paid properly.
Speaking of which, I wondered if we'd each like to talk about what you're working on at the moment, or your kind of next thing. Maybe to round off. Anita, do you want to, because you're in your studio right now, aren't you?
Yep. So I'm trying to recall what I'm even working on, even though it's like kind of binary. So I'm kind of working on two things at the moment. One is the FLAMIN project. I'm still going ahead with that. So that's at a stage where I'm starting to make kind of arts council applications and thinking about alternative ways of financing, kind of outside of arts council and grants. So that's a whole journey that I'm doing. But with the other project, which is focused on my creative practice, I'm looking at kind of alternative ways of interacting with archival materials. So very much looking at kind of VJing techniques, video mixing, and web-based documentaries to kind of explore stories of kind of Black Britishness. So yeah, that's what I'm spending a lot of my time kind of doing, like learning new skills and collaborating with DJs and stuff. So yeah.
And you've been kind of working with a lot of grassroots archive organizations throughout the past few years, haven't you?
Yeah, so a lot of them I've kind of found on Instagram, which is kind of weird because you would kind of think, what are archives doing on Instagram? But then it's been a great way of me finding these grassroots kind of organizations. So a few of them have been looking at kind of documenting accounts of Ghanaian elders growing up in the diaspora, so outside of Ghana, and kind of creating a whole, I guess, database of all these stories. So one of them is called Nana Project. I'm working with them on the FLAMIN project. And I've also started reaching out to other kind of grassroots organizations. One is called Senam Archives, and she looks at digitalizing kind of old Ghanaian photos. Yeah, and I'm in the process of reaching out to more, like Bumpkin Files, who looks at documenting life outside of London, so Black lives outside of London. And yeah, I'm just looking at kind of widening my network and seeing where there could be opportunities for collaboration. And I guess moving that on to kind of creating more kind of event-based kind of points of connection that kind of interrelay work, but also kind of fostering conversation and I guess pushing other, like everyone's practice and everyone's interest in such materials, and not having it being restricted to like institutions or like going to the National Archives where you have to do all these legalities to even see the work. So yeah.
Great. Cool. Holly, what are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, well, for the project that's connected to FLAMIN, I'm making a short film at the minute, which is a new direction in terms of it's for more of a cinematic context rather than installation, like a looped piece. It'll be more a beginning and an end, which is like really, really new terrain for me. But yeah, so looking at the relationship between my mother and brother and the role that the voice plays in disempowerment or empowerment, and kind of the absurd way that a human life gets measured and valued. Guess I should just say here that my brother's nonverbal and has cerebral palsy, so there's that whole element to the film. But it's looking at not just the details of care, but the details of language and communication outside of words as well, through gesture and pauses in the spaces between, and reflection, and their relationship, but also David's relationship to his world in his own way of communicating. So there's that, and then that project is about a 10-minute film, and that's been funded. So I'm working on that to come out in 2022. But then I'm also working on a larger documentary that's growing out of. It's not about the same thing, but it is about my mother and brother, and it's much more based in a longer story that I don't need to get into here. But that's going to be growing out of the short film. So that's exciting too, because I've always known that I want to have a practice. It's both in video art, but also documentary, because a lot of the way I make anyways takes a documentary approach. So it's exciting to be now dipping my foot into that terrain.
And are both, you're thinking with the 10-minute film that you'd show it as like an installation in galleries and then also screen it as a single screen thing in festivals as well? Yeah,
so hoping to apply and have it do a festival circuit, and then definitely open to it being, because it's actually going to be a 2-channel on a single screen, but 2 channels, is that what you'd say? So there's 2 screens interacting with each other, which will really easily be able to translate to an exhibition space.
Great, thanks. And Joseph, what have we got in the pipeline?
Well, I've got so BFI screening is on the 16th of October, so that's like the worldwide premiere. And on the 14th, I have at Frieze Art Fair, as the part of the Circa Days thing, we have a ceremony with Marina Abramovich, and she selects the winner of 30,000. And what I put for my thing is that I want to use the money to go from moving image to installation. So with or without that money, I still will apply for Arts Council funding, but I really want to take the film and exhibit it as a live installation piece, as well as working on my 2015 film I made about my friend Shannon in San Francisco, who sadly died this year. I really want to kind of push that, which is about queer isolation, loneliness, addiction, and like a never-ending quest to kind of feel pretty. And it's kind of like a homage to her now. Like the whole project again has changed now that she's gone. So that's kind of like what I want to be working on. And just other stuff, music videos.
It's great that
I'm going to stop doing drag as well.
Oh yeah,
done. Well, my last show is going to be Wembley, which is a pretty good last show.
When's that?
On New Year's Eve.
Yeah, so anyone anyone that's in London, do turn up. Great, I think we'll round it off there. But just like to thank all the artists again, and do check out their work in the B3 online program. And thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you.